Hello and welcome. My name is Amy White. Today we will be looking at recent scholarship on Revivalist Evangelical, George Whitefield, and Frank Lambert's article, Peddler and Divinity, George Whitefield and the Great Awakening, 1737 to 1745, from the Journal of American History, Volume 77, Number 3, from December 1990. The colonials were facing a society whose faith was intertwined with the powers of government and religion. And suddenly, the revivalist movement that sparked the Great Awakening developed, led by George Whitefield, who enraptured the souls and invigorated the faith of American colonials in the New World. George Whitefield may have been the best known Protestant in the whole world, but was also considered the single best known religious leader in the American colonies during the 18th century. Whitefield was also, at his best, a pastor of a large flock, and at his worst, a publicity seeker that utilized his fame to spread an evangelical message with the American colonies. As an itinerant evangelical preacher, Whitefield traveled across the American colonies, spreading the message of salvation to the depleting religious societies of the colonies. George Whitefield was an Anglican ordained clergyman. He is best known for the stirring revivals tours throughout the American colonies. Whitefield was the first in a line of prestigious itinerant evangelical revivalists in American history, followed by Reverend Charles G. Finney and later Reverend Billy Graham. His preaching influenced many religious political leaders in colonial times and brought him numerous followers from all walks of life. Whitefield came to the colonies in 1740 with an innate ability to evangelize, bolstered by his commercial ability to publicize his activities and initiatives. As noted in Frank Lambert's article, Peddler and Divinity, George Whitefield made use of the emerging commercial infrastructure of society to gain publicity through newspaper notices, and advertisements announcing his coming, and articles defining him personally and theologically. The daily newspapers of the time provided a powerful means of self presentation. Whitefield's self promotion of his evangelicism and humanitarianism foreshadowed his arrival and in person work, that upon his arrival had the public ready and prepared to embrace him. Whitefield himself became a commodity, as his team sold his sermons to readers, making him and his message a trending topic of the day. His use of effective marketing strategies to promote his upcoming travels, even up to 2 years before his preaching tours would arrive, successfully created local anticipation and excitement. Through whatever means, press coverage on both sides of the Atlantic prepared men and women to receive the spoken word from this extraordinary evangelist. Whitefield's preaching style invoked a deep-seated desire to save, giving him a sense of divine purpose that ultimately made him an effective preacher. He became known for his message of salvation to common people and were usually neglected by the established churches of the period. At the pulpit, his tactful sermons addressed ordinary people. He appealed to the heart and through emotion, doing so without the assistance of sermon notes. He was a master of rhetoric that brought his numerous followers from all walks of life and faith, including Benjamin Franklin. Franklin printed his sermons in support of Whitefield's ministry and even defended Whitefield's integrity when opponents accused him of any misdoing. Theologically, Whitefield sided with Calvinists, but his interests in preaching were more substantial than his desire to define a theology or a denomination. Whitfield's sermons passionately made declarations for the necessity of spiritual rebirth. Within newspaper articles, he noted the acceptance of his sermons across denominational lines, appealing to all Christians in all faiths. The focus of his sermons was on unwavering redemption and the power of God's saving grace through faith alone. A common theme of the period was the idea of a Christian becoming more Christ-like or reaching a state of perfection. However, Whitefield considered the idea of perfection to be an unobtainable goal, that to be perfect was not reachable on earth. Instead, Whitefield focused his preaching on the preparation of humanity for the next life in heaven, and humanity should strive to obtain God's saving grace before departing this life. Within his sermons, Whitefield illuminated his ideology that Christ represented perfection and that in this world it wasn't tangible, thereby shifting the burden of the salvation of his followers and placing it in heaven's hands. Ultimately, Whitefield's revival tours returned again and again to the shores of the American colonies, where in 1770 he died, as he had hoped he might. Whitefield's preaching sparked the Great Awakening, appealing to thousands of people to turn to God and return to American churches. Whitefield's innovation in marketing and utilizing commodities to service and even educate the public through written word to create a significant following of ordinary people with a simple command to seek faith and obtain salvation. Whitefield's long-standing message to all was that faith alone, a person can obtain salvation. Thanks so much for listening.